Welcome back to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life. We have a really important show for you today. It's probably, I would say, a serious show, and it's in line with our discussion for the month of June right now, which is all about truth telling, honesty, and the lack thereof. And we're closing out the month with Pixie joining us, which we're really excited to. I'll welcome our guests in a minute. But before we really begin and get into our topic of recognizing narcissism, I would like to make sure for anybody who's listening to our podcast today that number one, we find this to be a really important, timely, and sensitive topic, and we're going to treat it that way today. We want you to know that if you after listening today, or even before listening today, if you know that you're in a relationship with a narcissist and you're really struggling deeply, that this podcast is not just enough for you, that it's really important that you go and seek some extra help. There's nothing more important than your healing and your ability to live a good life as far as we're concerned. So we really want you to make sure that you seek some help. We'll have some ideas in the show notes of some books and some places that you might go, and places on YouTube even that you can start to get yourself more educated and listen into. But that first and foremost, we want you to know that your own personal healing journey is your responsibility, and we really encourage you to go get some help if you know that you're in a relationship with a narcissist. So, recognizing narcissism, Laurel, Pixie, thank you today for being willing to speak into this topic that's so timely because, the word has become very Main Street, hasn't it, ladies? It's really like out there all the time. Yeah. And there's a good thing about that and the bad thing about that. The good thing about it is that people are recognizing that it's a true issue and a true condition that can cause actually a lot of trouble in people's lives. I think that the difficult thing, or the less great thing about it is, we treat it oftentimes as just kind of they're just being narcissistic, like it's, a passing thing. Where if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, it's not a passing thing, and it's not light, and it's not something to dismiss easily. So, I'm just glad that we're advancing the conversation, and I hope we can help advance it a little bit today here on the podcast. So, well,
me too.
Yeah.
Thank you for that reminder. Just because it is more commonly talked about does not mean it's more easily dealt with, or we should take it lightly. So I think that's a great reminder.
Yeah. And people that are struggling in relationships with narcissists, it's anything but light. It's very, very heavy, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Very heavy. Very heavy.
So where do we want to start?
So let's start with I want to just say that I want to thank Pixie for being willing to come on the show and offer her insights and her. So Pixie, Pixie, let me know if you agree with me, but I think of you, Pixie, as someone who does the hard work. You're the one who you find out, oh, I might be in a relationship with a narcissist. And now you go out there and you start investigating, right? You start reading about narcissism. You learn a lot about it. You understand, how complex it is. And you do the hard work of understanding it and becoming knowledgeable on the subject. So I just want to thank you for your willingness to do that. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Laurel, for having me. It's certainly a difficult subject for me. It's one I've struggled with unknowingly for 60 years. And then when I kind of attacked it and, as you said, delved into the hard work, it was knowingly a very difficult challenge. Narcissism is it's hard to get your hands around when you're in it. And I was in it from birth. I was raised by a narcissist. I think I've said in previous episodes where I was a guest, I was born in not a one-parent alcoholic family. I had two alcoholic parents. My family was, riddled with addictions. And the environment was, chaotic and dramatic, as most addicted families are. But a very common trait that goes along with these kinds of addictions is narcissism. I thought it was enough to deal with alcohol
Yeah.
and a brother who was, cocaine addicted, but really one of the more underlying difficult kind of consequences of that kind of childhood environment is narcissism. So for me, it was my life. I was raised in it as a child. It set the foundation for all relationships. And so as a teen, I dated narcissist unknowingly. I married a narcissist unknowingly. And it really wasn't until I figured out that there was this somehow toxic thread throughout all of my, like, quote, intimate relationships that I started kind of delving in. One other thing I want to emphasize, not only is narcissism common with other addictions, it's extremely common with codependence. And as you know, in previous episodes I've shared with you, I am a recovering codependent. I've come a long way, but now realize that there is literally a magnetic attraction between codependents and narcissists. It's an attraction really that goes at the soul kind of wound level. Both a codependent and a narcissist are deeply wounded, usually low self-worth. So what they do is they play off each other. Codependents, by their nature, they want to fix, they want to enable, they want to care, they want to caretake, and they throw their lives into the lives of others, abandoning themselves. Well, what a great person to do that with. A narcissist who also wounded, but comes at it from the opposite vantage point of take, use, manipulate, control, get what they can in order to, fulfill their own needs. So it's like this match made in heaven until it's not.
Yeah. And I want to speak into that a little bit, Pixie. I'm so glad that we kicked off there too, because when I go back to my days of working in the counseling world and working with people a lot in addiction, sometimes I think I only had a couple of clients over that time who had personality disorders. But one of the things I want to say and educate our listeners into a little bit here is when you go to counseling in the mental health field, the first thing that they do is diagnose you. And when they diagnose you, they're looking for usually what we call an Axis 1 disorder, which is one that's treatable and one that we have specific kind of protocols to help treat. Sometimes it's medication, sometimes it's just talk therapy. I think we're expanding a little bit, but I'm not in that field anymore, so don't know. Then we also are looking for if the problems are very persistent and seem to be very threaded through all the presentation of how somebody shows up, then we begin to look at what we call Axis 2 diagnoses. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking a little bit about that today, but what I want to say to people is that you can be on the Axis 1 diagnoses, which is, maybe your let's say obsessive compulsive, and that you have narcissistic tendencies, and there's features. So we might write those down there. But when you're seeing someone, and I was advised as a mental health counselor years ago that I would never diagnose somebody on as a personality disorder on that Axis 2 without seeing them for 6 months to a year. That it takes that long to determine that the characteristics that we're looking at and the behaviors that we're looking at are so persistent that this is a lifelong condition, and one that most people I don't want to say all because I think any black and white is difficult, but most clients will not change. They will not grow out of. They could improve and they can do some work, but this is how their character formed. Their character formed around these certain kinds of behaviors and thoughts and ways of being in the world, and this is their character now. So it's a, as we talk about narcissism, if someone's diagnosed in a personality disordered way as a narcissist, they're unlikely to change much over the course of their life unless they're really working hard to do it. And that oftentimes is not the case. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Laurel,
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's really important because when we were talking about how, mainstream or how much more we're using the word narcissist, I think it's really important to think about, maybe everyone could have narcissistic behavior or reactions or, moments in time where even, I might exhibit narcissistic behavior.
Yeah.
Laurel, but the difference is, when we are born into it and it's part of our character at the core, it's hard to change. So I think that's a really important distinction for our listeners and for me.
I think that the key point here too is that we all are born narcissists. As children, it's how we survive. We get angry. We are black and white. We're selfish. We do that to survive. And the
me. Me over here.
The new, the normal, this functional way to grow up into an adult is to kind of lose those childlike ways, those childlike behaviors, those narcissistic behaviors, and grow into a more compassionate, empathic, understanding, communal, cooperative kind of human being. And so we all kind of revert, I would say, to our childlike narcissistic behavior, especially, when we're triggered. And so, the first thing that I would want any listener to hear is that narcissism is on a spectrum.
Yes.
Nobody's zero, and well, there are some people. I feel like I was married to one that was 100, but you can go anywhere on the spectrum, and also at any point in your life, depending on your stresses and triggers that are going on around you. But I think it's an important, maybe important segue to go into. So what are these kind of narcissistic behaviors? Because, I have a list of books, and by the way, Laurel, I want to give you the titles and authors so that you can make them available for the listeners. But so it's pretty accepted now that by psychologists and researchers in this field that there are 7 different types of narcissists. So that's why it took me 60 years to figure it out, because I happen to be in relationship with 4 of them. They look different, their personalities are different, the manifestation of narcissism is different, but when you get narcissism down to the kind of the raw text, you can see, where the commonalities are. So you can get that kind of grandiose narcissist that we all were kind of subjected to, relatively recently, the one that's overt, and it's actually called an overt narcissist, grandiose, center of attention, seeking praise and affirmation. And then you can get a covert narcissist that kind of like more shy, quiet, but highly anxious narcissist. You can even come across a communal narcissist where they spend their amazing amount of time and energy giving, doing this, volunteering because of the need for their external kind of praise. So it's hard to just sit here and say, oh, 10 traits. This is a narcissist. But I do think there are some salient traits of all narcissists across all those 7 different types that at least I personally would want people to have in front of them. And
so let's go right into those. Yeah, let's go right into those, Pixies, because I feel like I want to make sure, on the show today that we've given enough information and people help them recognize, right, and begin to question, is this person a narcissist if they have no other background in it? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's just some basic behaviors that are common to all 7 types. One is that narcissists tend to absolutely live for admiration and acknowledgement. They live for external validation because inside they're actually very lost. Have low self-worth, and they're kind of wounded. So they have this like grandiose sense of self-importance. And they even, some of the narcissists that I've actually had relationships with, fantasize about being powerful and influential and important, and they exaggerate their abilities and their accomplishments, and they're just absolutely preoccupied with power, control, success. So with all that, narcissist usually has an exaggerated sense of kind of like what I would call being unique and special. Nobody understands them. Nobody can help them. Which is why, by the way, few of them ever go to counseling, because they just think that 1, they don't need help, and 2, they're just above people that just don't understand. So they
can't get it.
They tend to have this like, oh, I'm just so unique. I'm so smart. I'm so special. I'm so superior, which takes it to the next thing, which is they have this strong sense of entitlement. They think they are above the rules. Policies don't apply to them. They're either smarter or they're more powerful or whatever, that they don't have to be in the group. Another pretty strong characteristic of narcissists is they have to control. So there is a lot of manipulation, triangulation, and exploiting others. They will win at all cost. They will come out at all times, and which kind of gets me to the number one kind of control technique that's used. This is another term that's thrown around frequently now. I didn't even know what it meant. My son ended up teaching me, and boy, is it true. It's called gaslighting. And gaslighting is when the person makes you feel they kind of use lying, they manipulate you, they deny, they'll do anything they can so that you doubt your memory, your sanity, and your perception. You actually get convinced that you're the problem. And so there's like a lot of projection and a lot of just tossing responsibility and accountability on the person that's in the presence of the narcissist. And then I'm going to end with, there's a lot more traits, day-to-day traits that I could point out that when you live with a narcissist, you're going to go, oh my gosh. The number one trait, and this is so hard for a codependent, empathic, highly compassionate, highly sensitive person to ever swallow, is their incapacity for compassion, understanding, and empathy. They do, and I hate to put it this abruptly and this like adamantly, they simply do not care. They can not care.
Mm.
So they will seek control and power in a relationship way above your needs and loving you and accepting you and caring for you.
Right.
It
Right.
it comes out in small and large ways.
Right, right. So let what I want to speak into just briefly is this idea. I think people wonder, like, how can that be possible, right? Like, there has to be that somebody has to be able to feel, something for somebody else. And what I want to say is, coming back to, we want to open our minds to be curious and to the possibilities. Like, what we're talking about is a big range here of extremes, right? And so, and also, I know for me, this was one of the most difficult things. Being in a family of addicts was, I used to say, and I would say this out loud oftentimes to my mom at different points, is, we don't get it because we aren't built that way. We don't think that way. We'll never really get it. Like, you can try to understand, you can do your best to understand, but at some level there's an understanding that we won't get to because it isn't in us to feel it, experience it the way that they do. So the other pathway in this for healing and for allowing for not struggling so much is to just accept it. Right? So part of it is like accepting if somebody you're living with doesn't have, they aren't empathetic, they aren't understanding, they aren't exhibiting that they have feelings, that they're caring and wanting to know in a certain kind of way. Like, at some level, it's like you might want to try to understand why they don't have that, but you may never be able to truly understand it completely. So there's an acceptance level that just has to happen for you to move on and for you to have some sort of level of peace in your life. And this is a very complicated juncture to get to, I think, when you're a person that, especially when you're bright and intellectual, right? It's hard to, like, I want to understand completely.
Well, and you're dealing with, usually, on the other end is, again, a highly sensitive, compassionate, empathic, even codependent. And
right.
So, we go to great lengths to
be understanding. To give credit.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and you're right. This is a spectrum, and I kind of painted the extremes on purpose, by the way, because you can feel tinges of what I said, and kind of get an understanding. I think it's important to know that this can get extreme in relationships, and so if you are a subject of gaslighting, or somebody not taking responsibility, or somebody not being accountable, or, it's something just to get educated on, become aware and watch. And Laurel, we can talk about things to do because, I have a list of ways to cope with living with. But
we want to, we definitely want to go there eventually. Yeah, for sure.
Right. I do think that stopping, pausing, watching, being vigilant, becoming aware, journaling, and again, not taking it on ourselves as, our fault, our sanity is to be preserved. So.
Yeah. And I wanted that's,
go ahead, Laurel, and then
I was just going to say, I think it's really important to observe, right? So you find yourself in a situation, I'll just speak into manipulation. Many times in my life, I have been the subject of a manipulator, right? Both professionally and personally. And being able to step back and say, how am I showing up in this relationship, right? Like, objectively, without blaming myself for being in that situation or blaming myself for causing that situation. But just observing is really important.
Absolutely.
To recognize the situation that you're in and to pause before deciding, what are my choices? What action do I need to take? How did I get myself in this situation again? Whatever you might be feeling.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it speaks to what I was going to share, which is, I know when I was, even when I was, in my counseling role and wearing that hat and becoming a pretty seasoned counselor, when I was working with somebody with a personality disorder, one of the features, right, that we see is you question yourself. You don't trust yourself. You start to question, like, is this really happening? They bring you into a state usually of confusion. And so that can be one of the markers for you to be on the lookout for, right? Is if you're feeling that way, if after every interaction you kind of feel like, wait a minute, what just happened? Is that's a good clue to go and this is why we go get help, is because you have to look at it outside the experience. You have to have somebody objective to be able to say to you, this is what I hear you telling me happening, X, Y, and Z, so that you can see it in more blanket, more black and white terms, rather than your confusion being, interfering with your ability to see clearly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
No. Yeah. So let's see. Either of you want to speak to that a little bit more personally around, feeling that sense of confusion in those relationships, or losing a sense of self? Because I do think that that's another big piece of the puzzle here, and why it's hard to go get help. Yeah.
I mean, I could just give endless examples, and it's funny because I was listening to you, and it's like, why did I wait so long to go and talk to somebody about this and get help?
Yeah.
And I wish I knew, because I wish I could just say the right thing to whatever or whoever listener out there, that would. But it got so extreme. Like in my marriage, we were having difficulties, and he made me he made me think, again, gaslighting, confusion, that our problems were because of my childhood and trauma, and that it was really nothing he was doing wrong. They're not going to take responsibility or be accountable for any role in anything, because they're always right. And so I went on an antidepressant because I was told by the one that supposedly, loved me, that it was my fault and I had to take care of my own mental health. And so, I was on it for about 3 weeks. I don't do well on meds, so I should never have gone on. But and that's just a personal thing. I'm not anything against antidepressants at all. As a matter of fact, I'm a big proponent, and I think that they're really beneficial. But they aren't for me.
Place for sure.
Yeah.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
They just aren't with my chemistry, and I knew that. But so I'm walking around the parking lot, at Michael's, and I was in such a state of disarray and confusion that I lost my car. I couldn't even remember what car I drove. And literally walking around the parking lot for 45 minutes trying to figure out where I was, what I drove, and how I was going to get home, and I, obviously it was a little bit of a wake-up call, and I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't the solution to my marital problems. But that's a pretty drastic example, but that's the kind of state of confusion that you can go into, lose your sanity and be, that's an example of gaslighting.
Right. And the ability to take somebody else's, information, right, and use it in a particular kind of way as power, right? So, for instance, saying, obviously it's because of your childhood, right? Versus there's some sort of dialogue around where are we together in this and how might you be impacting it or how might I? Like, again, it's this idea of the dialogue is more collective, more collaborative, more mutual, in a healthy relationship where there's a possibility of being able to move forward. But when it's just black and white, it's got to be your problem. It's got to be your fault.
And to follow up on that, another characteristic, they can be very intelligent. As a matter of fact, studies have shown that they are above intelligence, if not super intelligent. And so the kind of the sad part of that particular story is that, they use your vulnerabilities, they use your what you've shared with them intimately, they use it to manipulate you and control you for negative reasons. And so it's that's a very common kind of manipulation control tactic that's used.
Yeah.
And I think that the manipulation is a really important place because some of the tendencies I think can show up in other personality disorders or other reasons in a relationship, right? But when you find yourself being manipulated and the manipulator is really playing on your, whatever it may be, your empathy, your compassion, your loyalty, right? Your own tendencies of keeping the relationship whole and in place. Mm-hmm. That, I think that is a clue that it's beyond giving up your power. I think, oftentimes I could be in a situation where I realize I think I'm giving away my power. But when you're manipulated, you don't even know that you are giving away your power because it's not intentional. It's not deliberate. You somehow find yourself in that situation without any power, which is why I think the reminder of, getting help is so important.
Yes. And I want to speak into that a little bit more too, because we're back to this idea of if you're with somebody who's a narcissist and they are incapable, of feeling, of empathy, of understanding, of being deeply emotional, right? Then the dialogue will never be about that in an understanding, sympathetic kind of way, right? And so one of the things that we can do, right, is to become more in touch with our own feelings, to feel more empowered. And this we have to do outside the relationship. You can't do this in that relationship. It has to be outside of it, right? Where you're with other people that honor your feelings, that you can grow an understanding of what your feelings are all about, and that you can begin to trust your feelings to lead you and guide you. And what's happened oftentimes in relationships that they've gone on a long time with a narcissist is you have cut yourself off from that part of yourself, or you have been led to believe that your feelings aren't worthy of being followed and honored, right? And yes. And that's where sometimes then we're in deep trouble, because our body and our being ultimately does know what's good and right for us, right? And we have to re-engage with that. Yeah.
I would follow up, and we've talked a little bit about what to do. We're kind of hinting at it, and one of them was get educated and become aware, be vigilant, watch. The one to follow up on you right now, I think, is a salient point, and that is get a support group. This is a situation that you cannot and will not do alone. And I don't care if the support group is luckily a neighbor that relates or something, but a group of one or two or a group of people who can listen, objectively, listen compassionately, and give you your own power back, help you to get your own feelings and power back, is paramount. There's one thought that came up for me too, because I struggled with this for a long time. And I think a kind of a sensitive, compassionate, empathic person does struggle with this. And so I want to mention it. I spent a good deal of time and energy trying to figure out intentions behind a narcissist. And, trying to understand, well, do they mean to do it? Is it intentional? Is it not intentional? And finally, an incredible coach that I worked with in Calgary, Canada, said to me, Pixie, what does it matter? You're spending too much time trying to make assumptions, trying to figure things out that's really not your business. Whether it's intentional or not doesn't matter. The outcome matters. The impact on your life matters. So stop spending this time trying to understand why and if this person is doing this. And I tell you, when I finally took that to heart, it let me focus on the real stuff, which is me, my healing, not my intentions, not theirs. And I just hope that somebody kind of hears that, because we want to think that our mother didn't intentionally did this to us. We want to think that the person you spend 26 years with in a marriage didn't do this on purpose. Well, I don't know. And I simply don't worry about it anymore.
Yeah. It's hard. It's very hard, because it's hard enough to see, the flaws in somebody we love who just isn't putting the toothpaste cap on. It's a whole nother level of, seeing the flaw of, wow, they're intentionally doing this to me to save themselves face or whatever it is, right? Like, this is a big leap, right, of what we're talking about. And it's very, this is when I come back to, right, this, as I was saying, Pixie, that dovetails beautifully with that. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to, think that you're going to get what their intentions are or aren't, or it's better to just step back and go, yeah, but this is happening and it's detrimental to me. It's not healthy in the relationship. And I'm condoning it by continuing whatever I'm doing as a part of it, right? So
and you certainly can't go to them, and you can't. So what happens is, you try to rationalize. You're trying to, like, well, wait a minute, you just said or did this, and you're going in kind of a congenial, cooperative, coordinated kind of way, but they don't have the capacity to rationalize. They're easily wounded. They're very quick to criticism. They're extraordinarily sensitive. They don't want to think rationally through what you have as an issue. It's not their issue.
And their rational mind works in a different way. So they'll take that rationality and they'll produce a different one. And then they'll overpower you in their in their way of rationalizing, which is also, again, one of those tricky things. It's like, well, now, and this is how we come to doubt ourselves, how we become confused, how we now get lost in the conversation. We don't even know where to turn next to have the next sentence to say, right? So this is why it's so complicated. Yeah.
They also tend to have a high intelligence. So in my particular case, you were asking for kind of a personal story. I was married to one of the brightest people I've ever met, still to this day. I mean, as far as intellectual quickness, mind, amazing. So when he spoke, I listened, because it's like, well, of course he knows. He's so brilliant. And I would just say to the listeners out there, beware of that kind of, I'm almost going to call it a mask, because they can hide behind that real high intelligence with a very low, like what I would call, emotional awareness and intelligence. So that's the tricky part. And the rational, they usually can out rationalize you on an intellectual platform.
Yeah. So
And
let's talk about ways. Oh, go ahead, Laurel. And then I
I
want
was
to
just
get
going to
into
say,
ways of getting help.
I
Yeah.
think it's really an important reminder that part of the cycle is, the person that is trying to navigate a narcissist, is in a state of self-doubt and questioning and uncertainty and, maybe even perplexed about how did this happen, and so that's a really delicate place to be in when you're doubting yourself and looking for a rational explanation, to bolster your self-doubt or to get you out of the self-doubt, right? And finding reasons, rational reasons why it's happening or how did it happen, when it really just feeds the self-doubt even more, because the deeper that you get into questioning, how did this happen? What is my part in this? Why is this happening? The deeper you are in doubt and uncertainty. So I think that's really, the outside, whether it's the peer group or noticing the other places in your life, the other relationships where you don't have the self-doubt, right? What are you bringing to the table? And just notice the contrast, if you will, between relationships and how you show up. And then the question is, well, how can that be true? How can I know nothing in one relationship, but not be that same way in another?
Yeah. And if you're isolated in your relationship, with someone who you think may be a narcissist, that also is one of the, the ways that the relationship can proceed, is that they're grooming you, manipulating you to just be okay, right, with what they've got. And so they don't want you bouncing it out there against other relationships and other places. And so if you are isolated, that's another sign that you need help, right? Just at face value, right? Like that, then you don't have a context to put it in. You don't have other relationships to see yourself functioning in to decide, wow, wait a minute, I'm healthy. I'm thinking clearly here. I'm doing okay. And then going back there and seeing that there's problems. So, definitely one of the avenues is to have other relationships where you can talk about what's going on openly, and not be afraid of being judged or accused of anything. Yeah.
Well, and isolation is another tactic used by narcissists where they don't want you to go out with your friends. Right. They don't want you to go over and see your family. They want, it's another control tactic. And even, sometimes there's some fear involved that if you're not, kind of acquiescing to those demands, that there could be, some retribution. But reaching out and trying hard to get a support is really important. One thing I wanted to kind of mention too, I spent a long time, learning boundaries. Laurel was actually a big part of this. And communicating my wants and needs and desires in a direct and simple way, and establishing boundaries to protect that. And, those are hard things to do. They're almost impossible to do with a narcissist. Boundaries are very difficult to do with a narcissist. They simply do not take the word no. And sometimes, depending on the degree of narcissism, they can get so quick to rage and overreact and angry that, you get even more scared to set boundaries. Right. So it's It's just something to be aware of. I am a
Yeah.
huge proponent of boundaries. I'm not saying this to say don't do boundaries. I'm
Mhm.
just saying don't be surprised if they're more difficult to implement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's another sign. It's another sign and signal that there's something unhealthy about the relationship. Because when you're in a relationship with I will reiterate this one more time. When you're in a relationship with a healthy person, you are able to talk about these things. People are able to take responsibility individually for their contribution. Even when I make an egregious mistake or outburst in my marriage, right? My husband is willing to say, did I do something that maybe brought it on, right? Like we're able to like look at it together, and vice versa, right? If he's like, was I not, or was I doing something maybe that created an environment where this was easily able to happen at this point, right? Which is an unusual at this point in our marriage because we're 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 in a healthy relationship where we dialogue about things and where when there's a warning sign, we're working on it right away, right? And so when you're not in that healthy relationship, it's good to hear, oh, this is what happens in a healthy relationship, right? This is how it looks when people are both functioning and able to take responsibility, be accountable, be loving, be understanding. This is how it looks. This is how the situations are more normal, right? And what's normal for you may look nothing like this. So,
Well, the
yeah.
other thing that you brought kind of raised in my head to highlight, and this is a really common saying in this narcissism world. Never wrestle with a pig because you're going to get dirty. And besides,
Yeah.
the pig likes it. And
Yeah.
what that means, at least to me,
Yeah.
is, engaging, defending, fighting with a narcissist is exactly what they want. They want the fight. They want to get messy. They want to get dirty. They like the mud. And they will pretty much assure themselves that they're going to win. So it's very difficult to decide when to engage, when to defend, when to fight if you're in a relationship like this. And I will just add one more caveat to this, and that is that especially don't engage, defend, or fight with a narcissist um, while others are around, because that they have a way of getting the group to rally around them, and sometimes it's even more difficult to hold your power when they have a way to do that. Now, I say that with a caveat in that if you have a trusted friend that understands and is fully apprised of the situation, and you have that kind of support, it sometimes works. But in general, when a narcissist is confronted by more than one person, they get even more, their raffles even more up, and it becomes even a more incendiary kind of situation.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. All right, as we close out the show today, I want to just say to our listeners, make sure you go to the show notes. If you're struggling with this and you're looking for more help, we're going to have book suggestions. We're going to have, Dixie mentioned a coach that she worked with in Calgary, Canada. We're going to put her contact information in the notes in case you feel like you want to reach out to somebody that we know has been vetted and can help you. And YouTube, we're going to put also a suggestion to YouTube videos that we have watched and we like and we feel like has good content in it for helping you get educated and support you. But first and foremost, if after the show you say to yourself, wow, I really think I'm in a relationship with a full-blown narcissist, or I don't know, maybe I'm struggling and I'm narcissistic. Go get help. Go talk to somebody. Invest in yourself. Create a space where it's safe to look and talk about things openly about what's going on in your life and your particular situation. We cannot be your counselor, your coach from afar. This watching a podcast, this is one of the things too. Like podcasts are great for getting information out there. They are not a substitute for therapy or for counseling or your own coaching. They're not meant to be a substitute for that. They're meant to be informational, invitational, and hopefully inspiring over time. So hopefully that's what we've done today. Inspire you to get to the business of your own healing and to your own beautiful life, and to really engage with yourself first and foremost, so that you know yourself, know thyself, right? So that you can show up in the other relationship in a stronger, more powerful way. Yeah. Anything else to add, ladies? Yeah, let's close out.
I do want to add one thing, because I think that if anybody is going to go out and kind of research this, they're going to hear the term gray rock, which is what a lot of the experts say to do. Basically, stay out of the emotional ring, remove yourself, and become just kind of like that gray rock, saying to yourself whatever affirmation you can say. I hold my power within, whatever, but you're going to hear gray rock a lot, and you're going to hear observe, don't absorb. In other words, just watch. Don't take it personally, don't take it emotionally, but don't let it become absorbed into your moment, your day, your life. Just try to witness as if you're like, I'm a scientist, so I actually envisioned myself as a scientist in a lab coat, observing with, I hate to even say it, but almost curiosity, like, what's he going to do next? Like, wow, I'm an observer. I'm collecting data. I'm staying out of the ring. I'm not in the mud. I'm just going to observe. It worked for me because that's my mentality. I throw it out there in hopes that maybe somebody else will latch on to that. Like, wow, I just have to stop and look. And no, I think the last thing that I would say is you're going to be fine. If you're motivated by this, that's 50% of the path. Like, you can do it. Once you're aware of it, then there are ways to deal and cope and heal.
And there's lots of help out there.
Yes.
Yeah. And not all the help.
Yeah.
And not all the help is necessarily good for narcissistic work. All right. So you might go to somebody. I want to make sure we don't close without saying this, because Pixie, you can speak to this directly, but is this idea that you can go to somebody and they might not be the person that can help you with this. Sometimes this is a more specialized understanding. Somebody needs to really understand the dynamics of this to be able to help you work with it. So you want to do a little research on who you're going to, in terms of if you're going to get help with a narcissist, or to help with for yourself having narcissistic tendencies, then you want to have somebody who's really specializing and educated in this territory. Yep.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's what I was thinking as well.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you, Pixie. Thank you, Laurel. Thank you, listeners, for being with us. And we really hope this show helps you and supports you today as you're on your journey. And let's all be a part of the idea of, maybe speaking into not letting the term narcissist be taken lightly and be tossed around, as if it's not anything that is serious in its own way, because it is. And we don't want to get too, dismissive about the importance of this topic. So I'm glad we spoke into it today. Thank you.
Me too.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Come back and visit us again, Pixie. We love it when you're here.
Oh, I love being with you guys. Thanks.
Yep. All right. We'll see you next time, everybody. Bye for now.